And a mutual friend called her one day and said, you know, they're going to have tryouts for a play at the Playhouse. Would you like to go? Well, that's all she needed. And being that she was living with my parents and my mother was a good babysitter, Sis came down and read for, I think, Mr. Pennypacker or something like that. Jerry Beckenbaugh was the gal that called her, and once she got in and smelled the grease paint and saw the activities, that's all she needed, because she had been, I found out later, had been very active in her high school in Cincinnati, both in art and in the drama program. They had a show that Smitty, they all knew him as Smitty down there, put on a blackface minstrel every year, and it was sold out for 3 weekends when they were allowed to do minstrels.
Right. Well, that was an art form.
Yeah. And Sis, in her senior year, was one of the end men.
Amid all of the problems already surrounding the theater, audience members were dropping off despite productions of Raisin, The Odd Couple, and Carousel. The Bentley Lenhoff issue has varying accounts. Lenhoff attended the board meeting, but most board members were clueless as to the reason why he was there. A majority of the board members claimed that they had not invited him. Strong indications exist that he was invited by 1 or 2 board members without the knowledge of the others. Whatever the reason, Lenhoff stormed out of the meeting. With a Youngstown Vindicator reporter present, the situation made headlines in the next day's newspaper. This news added to the rapid drop in ticket sales. With chaos reigning at the Playhouse, the Save Our Stage Committee was organized by Playhouse volunteers with the purpose of ousting the existing board and installing Lenhoff as executive director. It was felt it was the only way to save a rapidly sinking Youngstown Playhouse. The SOS Committee picketed relentlessly in front of the Playhouse for weeks, increasing awareness of the Playhouse dilemma. The thought was, if the Playhouse closed its doors with the current board, those doors would never reopen. With increased SOS and local media pressure, board members gradually began to resign. The Vindicator, meanwhile, was doing some investigating of the situation and uncovered numerous dark secrets. The Playhouse failed to pay taxes on beer and wine sales, thus having their liquor license revoked by the state of Ohio. In addition, state and federal taxes had not been paid by the theater since 2001, some 3 years previous. Add to that, they were seriously in debt, and the meeting that Lenhoff attended was in fact an illegal board meeting since it lacked a quorum. Soon, 1/3 of Playhouse season ticket holders were demanding a legal board meeting to be held, along with threats to cancel their season tickets. This, along with a threat from a local attorney to sue the board, resulted in all remaining board members submitting their resignations. The way was now clear to install Bentley Lenhoff as the new executive director and rebuild a faltering local theater institution.
He did get a phone call. We were in northern Michigan. He got a phone call and it said, do you want to come back and be Commodore of the, oh my God, Titanic? And he was kind of intrigued, and we came down and he talked to some people, and they said the Playhouse is really in bad shape, and he couldn't stand to see that happen. So I think that he wanted to come back and see what he could do to rescue it. And so whether the board wanted him to or not, I don't know. They finally agreed to it.
Lenhoff handpicked a new board, quite a bit larger than the previous one. It went from 5 to 23. With a blockbuster first season under Lenhoff, audiences started to return. Lenhoff's previous 20 successful years at the Playhouse paid dividends when the Playhouse really needed it. Season ticket sales skyrocketed, and single show sales saw a dramatic increase. By the time Lenhoff's new season began, $50,000 in debt had been paid off. His new staff was of the first-rate quality. Janice Aubrey, Jim Liebarger, Paul Strobel, Matthew J. DePattiste, Paul Kimple, and others that had proven themselves over the years at the theater. Lenhoff's belief in the Playhouse was strong.
The Youngstown Playhouse is the cultural center for the people of the Mahoning and Shenango Valleys. The Playhouse must remember this. Always.
By January of 2005, 5 months since Lenhoff's return, significant progress had been made. Season ticket sales soared from 289 to 1,410. Average performance attendance had risen from 70 to 225. All Sunday brunches were sold out, and inherited debt had been reduced by $120,000. In addition, the theater was attempting to reacquire the liquor license that had been lost in the year 2000. Accomplishments continued to add up, including reintroducing the yearly Arthur Awards ceremony.
It keeps going because people want it to keep going. I was amazed, just in general here in Youngstown, because of what they'd gone through financially and such, that so many arts organizations survived. And they survived from the tenacity of the people who just would not let them die.
John Holt would join the Playhouse staff in 2005 as the new business manager. Holt had a strong theater background and was sure to be a strong addition to Lenhoff's team. But things changed quickly in the theater world, and so they would once again at the Playhouse. Just prior to the second show of Lenhoff's second season, he would abruptly resign from his position. After just over a year back at the theater, Lenhoff's health would require him to leave the Playhouse once again. With Lenhoff now gone from the Playhouse, John Holt was hired as a new managing director. Having served as business manager under Lenhoff for several months, Holt had big plans for the Playhouse. The first of those plans would close the 82nd season at the Playhouse. Jekyll Hyde The Musical was perhaps the most ambitious undertaking to date at the theater. From both a technical and cost perspective, it was a giant undertaking. This would become Holt's trademark, with lavish and costly productions of The Secret Garden, Sweeney Todd, Disney's Beauty and the Beast, and Titanic, the musical, to follow. People liked Holt and liked working with him. He had new ideas. The fact that he was staging recently closed Broadway blockbusters brought many actors back to the Playhouse. But the euphoria that seemed to exist would be interrupted by the news of the passing of former Playhouse scenic designer Paul Kimple. Kimple had left the Playhouse by this time. Although no clear reason seems to be available for that exit, health reasons seems to be the most likely. Kimple was to the technical side of the Playhouse what Bentley Lenhoff was to the management side. He had been with the Playhouse for 40 years, and his work left an indelible mark on every production that he designed. Season 83 would bring audiences on Golden Pond and the return of Lynn Nelson Rafferty to the Playhouse stage after a long absence. With great successes during this season and season 84, no one was prepared for what lay ahead for the Playhouse. Rand Becker was now the new president of the Playhouse, and season 85 started off promisingly with a riotous comedy, Noises Off. The rest of the season was certain to be a crowd pleaser, with productions of Company, And Then There Were None, Big, Blood Brothers, A Streetcar Named Desire, and West Side Story. But with And Then There Were None in rehearsal and heading for a November opening, Holt would suddenly announce that the Playhouse would be closing its doors within just a few days. It soon became apparent that physical repairs to the building were rising in cost, since they had been ignored for so long. Many apparently in the know also speculated that too much money was spent on the lavish musicals without sufficient return at the box office. The Playhouse doors closed, and Holt left the theater apparently by mutual agreement with the board. The other shoe, however, was about to drop. Upon further investigation, it was discovered that no withholding taxes had been paid to the IRS for Playhouse employees for some time. They had been used to pay other bills. In addition, royalties also had not been paid, thus forcing sanctions on the Playhouse from publishers, and utility bills were seriously behind. The IRS would now padlock the Playhouse doors until all IRS money was paid. The Playhouse was on the brink of total disaster, and the Vindicator was front and center, running front-page stories on the situation daily. Playhouse president Rand Becker worked tirelessly to address the IRS issues. If these could not be resolved, the Playhouse would fade away into theater history. After a month or so, Becker was able to pay the IRS debt, and the padlocks were removed. But nothing is easy at the Playhouse, and when they entered the building, they were greeted with a flood. No one had shut off the water when they closed in November, and pipes had burst all over the building. The Playhouse was looking at an $800,000 cleanup.
And there was a big group of us who volunteered to go up to the costume shop and salvage what we could of the costumes, because the costumes were absolutely phenomenal. And literally, there's 2 stories to the costume shop, and the best costumes are on the top. And we just put a long plyboard down the stairs and slid them down, and they were so covered with ice. They just and hit the bottom, and ice went flying all over the place.
With appeals to the community for help and a lot of volunteer manpower, the cleanup was eventually accomplished, and the Playhouse was prepared to open its doors after about 6 months. An abbreviated summer season would be mounted under the title Barefoot to Blues, and would include a production of Barefoot in the Park and Blues in the Night. The only question was, would audiences return?
This is not something to quit on. This has been around for too long, and too many people came before this place that built this place up. You can't, you can't do it. And so through that, I said, I'm doing some shows. And they're like, and it kind of was just like, okay, whatever. And we thought it was going to be the farewell to the Playhouse.
Yeah.
We wanted to send it out on a high note. So we planned to do 2 shows in a month. It was July. And in January, we had been frozen.
Right.
The place got cleaned up at least enough to where we could maybe put on a show. And the skeleton crew, Johnny Picano and Candy, and same crew that pretty much I'm still friends with. But we ended up doing Barefoot in the Park and Blues in the Night that I directed, and try to do a little bit of a different for the community. A musical, bluesy, jazzy, and then just some old school nice comedy. And lo and behold, we didn't close.
With Patricia Fagan now the new managing director, Barefoot to Blues opened to an enthusiastic Youngstown audience response. An additional boost was provided by local Youngstown philanthropist Tony Larisha, who made a $10,000 donation to the cause. The Playhouse was back open for business. The musical, All Shook Up, would be the first major show done at the Playhouse since the reopening, and would be directed by Mary Ruth Lynn. Lynn would stay on at the Playhouse as the new executive director after the show closed, with Fagan remaining as managing director. Lynn would inaugurate the Griffith Adler series in the Moyer Room. This would consist of more offbeat productions than could be presented on the main stage, the first of which would be a production of The Fabric of a Man.
An outlet, a place to be creative, a place where anyone can go and hone their skills and become whatever they choose to become. Yesterday is a classic example of the Playhouse's many things. Everything can go wrong, but eventually the bottom line is we can go from total despair to domination like that.
Many external people and situations influenced the Playhouse through its history. But few non-Playhouse people made a mark on the Playhouse, as did John Kenley and his Kenley Players. That's why the news from Cleveland, Ohio of Kenley's passing in 2009 at the age of 103 was actually a personal loss to the theater. Although retired when he died, Kenley in his heyday provided many Playhouse actors and technicians with summer work in professional stock theater. He also served as the launchpad for many of them toward a successful professional career. There was no denying John Kenley was a vibrant force for the Youngstown Playhouse. As longtime Playhouse and Kenley actor David Gendry said, quote, "You will never see a guy like that again." Season 87 would start out strong in September of 2010 with a David Gendry-led production of Chicago, the musical. The Playhouse would be one of the first non-professional theaters to present the iconic show. Unfortunately, Chicago seemed to be the high point of that season, with the possible exception of Oliver later in the year. The Playhouse would fall back to an old standby to open season 88, Gypsy. Always a crowd pleaser, Gypsy starred two popular Playhouse actors, Liz Rubino and James McClellan. Although this season would prove to be somewhat stronger than the previous one, it was bolstered to a great extent by the acquisition of numerous grants which were badly needed. But as season 88 moved along, a longtime valued member of the Playhouse family would pass away at the age of 90, Rennie Griffith. Griffith had legendary status at the theater, just like her late husband John. She served the Playhouse for 40 years in many capacities, including appearing in 26 roles on stage. Bentley Lenhoff offered his thoughts at this sad time.
Rennie Griffith was more than a great actress. She was a great lady.
Despite spotty stage successes, the Playhouse was in dire need of cash. The community support campaigns that produced thousands of dollars were a thing of the past. Season 89 in 2012-2013 would add to the financial woes of the theater. The season saw more shows produced in the small, intimate Moyer room than in the main theater. The thought was that shows were cheaper to produce in a smaller venue, but they also produced considerably less income than shows in the main theater. 50% of 500 is much better than 75% of 60. The Playhouse would continue to see modest successes, combined with disappointing box office receipts over the course of the season. The limited use of the main theater remained an issue. To add more distress to the Playhouse climate, another legendary Playhouse actress passes from the scene with the death of Sis Soller. Soller was a prominent Playhouse actress and figure from the Market Street days, and her love for the theater was evident in everything she did. From many roles on stage to heading the Playhouse board, Sis Soller was a source of strength for the theater for countless years. Soller's memory lives on, among other things, with the Playhouse lobby bar which she designed. Consisting of Playhouse curtain time covers, it gives a brief, concise history of Playhouse productions.
I often ask myself, and I could remember when it was really in its doldrums, when John Cox came in and that group of people, they would meet at our house and try to figure out how they're going to make things work out to keep the doors open. And I would listen to them and say, well, boy, you guys have a big job on your hands. But somehow they were able to make it work, and they had some real problems and some real decisions to make as far as, directors, people that were running the theater in their behalf. It was a tough deal, but they all wanted it to work, and so like the Music Man said, you got to think it, and if you want to think it hard enough, maybe it'll work,
At the end of the 2012-2013 season, Rand Becker would step down as Playhouse president. No one did more for the Playhouse at a critical time than Becker. He took on all of the problems of a theater that was starting a rapid slide into oblivion, and was able to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. Rand Becker saved the Youngstown Playhouse, and in recognition, the Playhouse lobby was rededicated in honor of Becker and his wife, Eleanor. As season 90 opened with the area premiere of the musical, Spamalot, things were not merry at the Playhouse. The cash crunch continued, and as the season moved along, only 4 of the 9 season shows would be produced in the main theater. The Playhouse was again on a backward slide as they headed on a fast pace for 2014.